welcome to the Made in America show right here on the King's Broadcasting Network. And I'm the Cajun contractor, Michael King, and I like to bring in my partner in crime, the Made in America guy himself, and the co-host of the show, Mr. Owens himself. Hey, my buddy, Greg Owens. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Michael. I hope you're doing well as well. It's a little cold here, but we're getting through it.
Well, it's beautiful weather down in subtropical Louisiana, and it's beautiful out there. But, man, I want to jump right into this, Greg. A lot going on. Got a great show. Man, I tell you, I talked about it last week, but my head is turning right now. What's going on with the new administration and the accomplishments and what's going on. But how is all this going to start affecting the Made in America technology products? I know we talked about tariffs, but man, I do like that idea with the tariffs that, Trump supports, but that, reciprocal tariff, which is basically whatever you charge me, I'm going to charge you. That is a new concept, right?
Well, it's a new concept, and it's a little bit more complicated than you might think, because reciprocal tariffs to a lot of people would mean you're going to charge me 10% on corn, I'm going to charge you 10% on corn. But what if one country isn't exporting any corn and the other, they have a low tariff on it because they don't export? So how do you actually do that math? So I think what they decided to do, similar to the Mexico, Canada, China thing, is suspend it. And they're going to do a study from now until the 1st of April. And in that study, what they're going to determine is probably a trade-weighted average. So, for example, France may charge us zero tariffs on certain products that they don't manufacture, but they may charge very high tariffs on things that they want to protect their market for. So they're going to do a trade-weighted average, and if that ends up being 10.5%, it'll be levied at that percentage across all products to avoid falling into sort of a mathematical trap, if that makes any sense.
Well, I always was a fan of that, to be honest with you, and I'm going to use certain states. I don't know if my audience realized, and I'm going to use the state of Oregon as an example. If you have a state that actually produces the product itself for the consumer, they do have a situation where they don't call it tariffs, but what they do is that some of the products are either outlawed or they taxed higher than a producing state. In a state like Louisiana, we're God gifted down here in Louisiana. I mean, what we have: seafood, agriculture, sugar, oil. There's been a study in Louisiana that if you took Louisiana and actually let it succeed from the Union and build a wall around Louisiana can support itself due to natural resources. But the point I'm trying to make is it makes no sense to bring in foreign shrimp if you're producing shrimp in the Gulf of Mexico. It just doesn't make sense. You follow what I'm saying? And plus, it helps the local economy, and it helps the local farmer. It helps the local producer. So I was always a kind of a fan of that, because when I went to Oregon, and I'm a beer drinker, everybody knows that. I like to, go a couple down. But there was a product called beer. It's just a white can with black label. It's made by the artisans. Well, you can get the beer a lot cheaper. It's pretty good. But if you wanted to get Coors and things like that, it was a lot more expensive, because they want to produce and support their own state. And I don't know how you feel about that, but I always was kind of a fan. So it's kind of the same concept, right, Greg?
It is the same concept. And the other thing that they brought up, which was quite interesting, is the concept of non-tariff barriers. And that's kind of what you're talking about right there, putting some sort of an excise tax on stuff that comes in from outside. There's a concept of value-added taxes, which are anywhere between 10 and 25% in Europe. And we send a car over there. The first thing that happens is they put a 25% tax on it in France. Well, I think in the study, the Trump administration is going to consider those value-added tax part of a tariff. And, other things could be labeling requirements that are just completely out of control, change all the time, force companies to change their packaging and put information on there in many different languages and apply for permits. And these are all designed to make it so complicated for somebody who wants to export a product into your country that you simply cannot afford to do it. Another example of that would be customs fees and charges for filing an import registry. There's a myriad of different things that are going to be looked at, but the idea is to sort of level the playing field and not just play these funky tariff games where we're going to have a 0% tariff on bananas with Guatemala, and Guatemala turns around and puts 100% tariff on our refrigerators. Well, we're going to take the refrigerator tariff into consideration, not the banana tariff.
Hey, man, you're going to be hopping that big bird soon and heading to Sin City. And I know you're excited to go out there, and you're going to be talking to a lot of the Made in America companies out there that are going to be exhibiting at the show. And I'm excited to get that information on this show because the last count, there's like 328 American manufacturers that's going to be exhibiting new technology over there.
Right. And I'm really looking forward to that. Obviously, we've been spending a lot of time on policy and politics in this the last 6 months, but I'm anxious to also get some producers on the show and talk to them about their experiences and get their perspective on these things, which we get every day. And we've been relaying that, but it'll be nice to get some new guests on the show and get their thoughts.
That you can touch, feel, and hold, which is very important. You get to see the technology and see, what's out there, and which is so important to the success of this show. Because as you know, Home Talk is a topic show, and Made in America is a topic show, and Ven America is a topic show, and we like to discuss the popular topics. Where there's nothing more, advantageous to this show than you can actually see the technology itself.
And meet the people and vet them. There's a lot of people that put American flags on their stuff, and it's really not made in America. So it's important to meet them, look at their products, and make sure that they are actually made here in the USA before we go talking them up.
Well, Greg, tell us about the show coming up today, though.
Today's show, I have Rosemary Gibson coming back to me. She was on before the election and she wrote a book called China RX, which if you haven't read it, we'll talk about where you can find that. Fascinating book. And really actually kind of scary at times because Rosemary is bringing things to light that most people simply don't know about that impact our drug supply. So if you can stick with us for the next 3 segments, I think you'll be really interested in what Rosemary has to say.
Yeah, I kind of remember that when she was on a while back. It was very interesting, and she opened up a lot of eyes to people, and she brought a lot of information to the storefront, so to speak,
Right, and every issue sort of requires a champion, somebody that can get behind it, and not necessarily looking to make a bunch of money on it, but just wants to take an issue that's really important or should be really important to all Americans and bring it out in the forefront. And she's done a wonderful job of that.
Yeah, and we have some new secretaries now. Mr. Kennedy got confirmed. You now have drug administration people. So you have in the new administration putting in their people, which is going to change a lot of the drugs and a lot of policy, and how this policy is going to affect not only the American consumer, but how it's going to affect the industry itself. Well, there's the 1 minute segment there. We up against the clock. We got to take a short break. We got to hear from our sponsors. When we come back, the Made in America guy is going to have Miss Rosemary Gibson's going to be on the show. I'm the Cajun Man. This is the Made in America show right here on the Home Improvement Broadcasting Network. Don't forget, we are streaming live on the World Wide Web at HomeTalkUSA.com. You can check out our new show, our topic, my television show at HomeTalkTV.com. All that can be accessed on our website. And if you want to update new topics, just drop me an email, michaelking1350 at yahoo.com. We're going to take a short break. Me and the Made American guy. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everybody, to Home Talk USA here on the King Broadcasting Network. This is the Made in America Hour, and I'm your host, Greg Owens, here with Rosemary Gibson, author of China RX, one of the most interesting books I've read in many, many years. Before we get to Rosemary, I want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors, our sponsor for this segment. It's Bond Products. For DIY carpet bonding, there's only one Instabond, and you can find them at bondproducts.com. Rosemary, welcome back. It's been a couple months since we chatted, hasn't it?
Greg, it's really great to be back with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure, and thanks for taking the time to join us today. And maybe some of the folks out there didn't have a chance to listen to the first time we got together, so I thought maybe we'd start off by having you give us just a general background of your, where you came from, where you went to school, what jobs you've had, and then we'll segue into talking a little bit about China RX, your book.
Oh, that sounds great, Greg. Well, I grew up in Long Island, New York, on the South Shore, and always enjoyed going to the ocean. Just beautiful, beautiful walks along beautiful beaches, some of the most beautiful in the world. Then I made my way down to go to college at Georgetown in Washington, D.C., and like many folks, never left. And I started my career in a think tank. It was actually the American Enterprise Institute. And it was in the early 1980s. And it was a great place where people who ran American government worked there. Former chairman of the Federal Reserve, Arthur Burns, noted economists from the Council of Economic Advisors, those who worked in Department of Health and Human Services, Housing, State Department, Middle East Accords, the ambassador to the United Nations, Jeane Kirkpatrick was there, Antonin Scalia, who became later a Supreme Court justice. So I was a 23-year-old kid, and this was just an incredible way to start a career. And little did I know that years later, all that exposure would come in handy to work on a book like China RX.
So before you decided to sit down and write the book China RX, what inspired all that? What sort of events, what life-changing experiences said, Rosemary, you got to write this book?
Well, it started almost more than 2 decades ago, Greg, when actually my husband said to me one day, this was in 2020, you need to write a book. And I'm sorry, in the year 2000. So I had no idea what to write about, but that was the beginning of writing several books. And they were all in the healthcare space. The first one was on medical mistakes, called The Wall of Silence. And that was just, the impact was amazing. But it took a lot of courage to put that one out. And so that gave me the courage to take on other tough topics. And, there was another book I did called Medicare Meltdown. And we're seeing that right before our eyes now. That book talked about how Medicare is just not fiscally sustainable and how it's really going to get us into trouble. But now we're seeing, as we're uncovering a lot of things going on in our federal spending programs, that there's tremendous opportunity to cut back improper payments. And this isn't just coming from the current administration. The Government Accountability Office found this out years ago. So many things that I've worked on throughout my career are really relevant for today. And then for China RX, I had met a colleague who worked at Consumer Reports. And he was asked to give testimony to a commission in Washington that I had never heard of. It's a congressionally appointed commission called the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission. And he was testifying on supplements that a lot of people take. Millions of Americans take supplements. And his testimony talked about the lack of quality oversight, especially for those products coming from China. So then that made me wonder, well, what about our prescription drugs, especially all the generics that we take? And I just started looking. And I want to say, Greg, no one paid me to do this. It started in 2014, and it's all in the public interest. And what I discovered, Greg, was so stunning. The first question I asked myself is, how come no one knows about this? How come no one knows how dependent we are on a single country for the components to make most of the medicines, 98% of the medicines used in every day in American hospitals and found in retail pharmacies. How come no one knew that this outsourcing began when there was virtually no regulation? Coming across memos showing that these drugs that or products that were coming into the United States, a very public spirited member of the FDA staff wrote a memo, which I have in my files, that said these products are unregulated and they could get to the president.
Right. And not only did they not know about it, how many people actually ever thought about it? Because this whole process that a lot of people would call the race to the bottom, trying to find a cheaper way to do everything, has led us to a lot of consumer products that we buy, things that used to last decades that now maybe last 6 months, this sort of throwaway society. Did anybody ever think that we were doing the same thing to our drug supply? And we could be getting drugs that either A, don't work as they're supposed to, or B, have stuff in there that we really don't want in there because it's all completely untested and unregulated. And we're going to have to go to a break, but why don't you close up this segment with some thoughts on that?
Greg, I remember testifying at one of the congressional committees in Washington, and a member of Congress asked a really good question, and I answered it to the best of my ability. I think it was a good answer. But I wondered, why is a member of Congress asking me, an unpaid private citizen, this question, when there are so many entities in Washington, D.C., whose job, you thought, was to oversee this? And you're right, just as we have seen the decline in the quality of so many products, I just posted on Sunday, and I'm going to start doing this, FDA enforcement reports of what they're finding in recalled generic drugs, pieces of glass, lack of sterility, some drug products in the wrong bottle with the wrong label. These things were unthinkable 20 years ago. So we have a lot to talk about, and we have some solutions to move forward.
Well, we sure do. And I want to come back after the break and talk to you a little bit more about China RX and the conclusions of that. But we are going to have to take a break and go off and pay some bills. This is Home Talk USA on the King Broadcasting Network. The Made in America Hour. We'll be right back with Rosemary Gibson and her book, China RX. Welcome back, everybody, to Home Talk USA on the King Broadcasting Network. I'm Greg Owens, your host, and this is the Made in America Hour. We're here with Rosemary Gibson, author of the book China RX, and as I learned, several other books that we just talked about. But before we get back with Rosemary, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for this segment, Aztec Washer, revolutionary and innovative roofing products since 1968. Their motto is seal it right, seal it tight. You can find them at aztecwasher.com. Well, welcome back, Rosemary. And I guess I'd like to follow up on the last segment by asking you, you mentioned that a lot of people don't know about these issues. I brought up the fact that I think a lot of people have never really put much thought into it. What are people going to take away from your book? I don't want you to spoil it, but what are the main topics you hit, and what are some of the big eye-opening conclusions that you come to?
It's a great question, Greg. one, how dependent we are. Second is some of the generic drugs and even branded drugs that are being imported into the United States for the treatment of cancer, for antibiotics, for treatment of depression, and hundreds and hundreds of other medicines, basic blood pressure medicines. And people don't know that the pill that they're taking may be made in China. Another key point in China RX is asking the question, well, if this product doesn't work right, who's liable? Making a poor quality drug in a country where FDA regulation is nothing like it is here in the United States, and frankly, where the regulatory system is falling apart over there, from my view about what FDA is not able to do there anymore, who's liable? So you can get away with making a poor quality drug and selling it to the American people with no consequences. Who are you going to sue? You're not going to sue in U.S. courts, and you're certainly not going to go to China to sue. So how risky this situation is, and how patients and consumers are at risk from the potential of poor quality medicines coming into the country.
Well, let me jump in real quick and remind the audience of something we talked about last time. It was during COVID, of course, there weren't a lot of FDA inspectors going over to China or India or anywhere. I mean, people were just not able to travel. And it would be normal and customary for FDA people to go in and inspect the facilities and make sure that they're producing drugs up to standards, that their testing is correct. That has basically come to an end in China, hasn't it?
It really has, Greg. So if you're a manufacturer here in the United States, an FDA inspector can come into your facility at 4 p.m. this afternoon and begin an inspection. So the unlevel playing field when it comes to oversight of the quality of manufacturing is just stunning. And now I gave a preview in China RX that things were not going to go well on the regulatory side, but I never imagined how bad that they would become as they are now. With China's anti-espionage law, that poses a risk to Americans and others that travel to China under the threat of detainment or arrest for, could be a lot of anything. And so what's happened is the FDA is finding it hard to get federal employees who are FDA inspectors to travel to China. And also it's not just the FDA, but it's regulators in Germany and other Western countries. They don't want to go. And that's a linchpin of assuring quality manufacturing of these products. So,
or it could be employees from the companies here in the United States that are buying these cheap generic drugs and reselling them. They can't even get their own people in there, can they? Or if they are,
well, I don't think, to be honest, Greg, I think there are a handful of big buyers, and we can put the blame on manufacturers in other countries, but the finger should come back to us as the big American companies that scour the earth looking for the cheapest products, as we've seen in so many other market segments, this. And for a product that's supposed to be so highly regulated, I mean, every pill has to be made right, every patient, every time. And without that regulation, it's a free-for-all. And it's such a far cry from what we've come to expect.
Well, let's shift gears here and talk a little bit about what's happened in the last month or so with the Trump administration coming in, with Mr. Kennedy recently being confirmed. Have you seen anything concrete happen, or are there new topics being opened up? What have you seen so far?
Well, I think what we're going to see with the confirmation of Robert F. Kennedy as the Secretary of Health and Human Services is a really strong focus on getting components in our food supply out of the food supply, which would be a great step forward. A second thing that he's going to do, he's committed to do, is to go back to the gold standard of science when it comes to food, when it comes to our medicines, to ensure we have good science, to know what the risks and benefits are of different products. And also when it comes to Medicare and Medicaid, kind of rein that in when there's really abuse of the system, that whether you're Democrat or Republican, you can see, well, gee, this is a problem. And I am aware.
Go ahead.
I am aware.
Say, our work at CPA, just so the audience knows, we work together on, Made in America issues. We run the committee. You had your own committee eventually at CPA, but it's not a partisan thing. This is something that we saw sparked just as much concern. It didn't matter what party affiliation you had. When members of Congress became aware of how just reckless this system has become, they were all concerned, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Especially the physician caucuses in Congress and others. When what's happening now, Greg, which is really extraordinary, and I'm really pleased to see, is that there's growth in independent testing of generic drugs to ensure that they're manufactured properly. And this is being started by large health systems. Kaiser Health Plan, they started a testing program a couple of years ago, and they require anyone who wants to sell to them that they have to have their products independently tested before they can submit a bid.
Now, is that testing each batch, or is that just random testing, or how does that work?
What they do is they'll select, say, a number of different drugs, and the independent testing entity will test, say, 3 batches. They'll sample 3 different batches. And that was the beginning. And I understand that places like Kaiser, that's where they got started. And now that they found what are the bad ones that they don't want to buy from, focus on the better ones. Now what they're doing is having repeat testing, to your point, periodically to ensure that quality remains the same with those products.
Right. And one of the fascinating things that you brought up in your book and you bring up in the past, there are certain drugs that we're not capable of manufacturing here in the United States because the entire process is transitioned overseas. We've got a couple minutes left in this segment. So this is the Made in America Hour. What is it going to take for us to start making things in the United States again?
Greg, I'd like to see us dust off an executive order that was signed by President Trump in August of 2020. And in that executive order is a provision for the federal government, including Department of Health and Human Services and the military health system and the Department of Defense, to prioritize procurement of quality, essential generic medicines that are made in the U.S. by U.S.-owned companies. And there's a bit of a premium.
That could include distribution through the VA, right?
Oh, that absolutely needs to happen. We could have a whole nother show on that, but there are industry forces really did a great disservice to our veterans and allowed generic drugs from India and China to be sold when previously they were not allowed. And there was no hearing on that. There was no regulatory commentary in the Federal Register. They just went ahead and did it. That's a whole story that needs to be unpacked. But our military also, they need to have quality medicines. And we can do that by assuring domestic procurement of domestically made products. And then if you have longer term contracts, those companies will be able to have the money to invest and the surety that they're building up a manufacturing capability that you'll actually have a customer for. That's where we need to be.
We're going to have to take a quick break here, but when we come back, I want to expand upon that topic. This is Home Talk USA on the King Broadcasting Network. I'm Greg Owens, and this is the Made in America Hour. We'll be right back to close this up with Rosemary Gibson. Welcome back, everyone, to Home Talk USA on the King Broadcasting Network. I'm Greg Owens, your host, and this is the Made in America Hour. I'm here with Rosemary Gibson. Before we get back with Rosemary, I want to give a big shout out to Lion Energy, our sponsor for this segment of the show. you can go absolutely anywhere with, this is a tongue twister, portable power solar generators. And you can find them at lionenergy.com. Thank you for sponsoring this segment, lionenergy.com. Rosemary, welcome back. And when we left off, we were talking about DOD and their ability to get involved in helping to solve this issue. And DOD testing of products that go into the VA or other forms of government-sponsored healthcare. Why don't you start out by talking a little bit about your thoughts on that and where that could all lead us?
Sure, Greg. Back in 2023, in November, the Department of Defense announced that it was launching an independent testing program for battlefield medicines. There's 42 of them that they decided they wanted to have tested. They aren't doing it themselves. There's a consortium of testing entities that are doing this really great work. And those results should start to come out in the very near future. And if those results are like what we've seen for other testing results that have been published by other entities, whether it's Cleveland Clinic or Stanford University, we're definitely going to see generic drugs that really should not be on the market, and they should not be allowed to be sold in the US. The problem is the purchasers, whether it's health plans or even consumers, we lack that information to make good decisions about what to buy. So I think we have an opportunity to bring transparency, which is a big theme in this administration and certainly in the Department of Health and Human Services. And with that transparency, we can begin to fix the market and keep the bottom feeders, as I call them, out of the market, so people can have good quality drugs and rebuild the trust that is so needed in our medicine supply chain.
Well, and here's an interesting one. Just like everything, it's not that simple to solve. And you have two different things tugging at you. You mentioned that our Medicare and Medicaid system is in a crisis because it's not sustainable. So that's all about how much money we're spending and pressure on budgets. There could be a lot of solutions to that, but that's tugging in one direction. We can't afford to pay any more. The other thing that's tugging in the other direction is what we're finding out about the quality of the medicines that we're getting and how absolutely frightening and dangerous that could be. Not only could these drugs not work as they're supposed to work, but they could also be contaminated with things we don't want in that drug supply. So hopefully, calmer heads will prevail. This doesn't turn into some, us versus them hyperbolistic argument on extremes, and we can really sit down and focus on solving both problems. And that could be very complicated, but certainly if we get the adults in the room with a lot of expert testimony from people like yourself, we might be able to meet in the middle and come up with a solution that's really going to improve the situation for everyone, right?
I'm very optimistic, Greg. And I also want to say that some of the poor quality generics cost more than the high quality ones. So we have to focus on value, and it doesn't always have to cost more. But then at the same time, remember, we're bringing back jobs to American workers. That generates revenue for communities, that increases the tax base, and improves our public health and national security. So it's a win-win all around.
Yeah, I think I recall you going through some math talking about what the government or what one of the insurance companies actually pays for these drugs versus what they buy them for, what it costs to produce them. And I was flabbergasted by how little it is to produce them and how much they're being charged. And I think you brought up the concept of, well, if it costs another couple pennies, which might be double what it costs to make it over there, but you get something that's quality and certified, wouldn't that be well worth it?
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. The example I gave, Greg, was a gentleman who worked in pharmaceutical manufacturing for years, and he went to get his blood pressure medicine refilled, 3-month supply, a generic, $157.50 for that 3-month supply. And he asked me, he said, Rosemary, how much do you think the manufacturer would get for that? And I thought, well, maybe $20. And he said, no, $1. So we have this enormous gap of profit and profiteering by Fortune 10, 20 companies that are the ones that are doing the buying and distribution. And we really have to close that gap. But we have to do it in such a way that assures quality. It's not just the cheapest. Everybody said, oh, let's get the cheapest generic. Well, it turns out we've all bought into that. But what the big buyers didn't tell us, that they're not focusing on quality. And that has to change. And the American public will be behind it 100%.
Well, I'm interested to see how this all plays out in that first 100-day period. And with Kennedy in there now and Trump is really disrupting a lot of different things. Hopefully this will be something that the administration focuses on. And the next time I have you back, I'd really like to talk about concrete solutions to bringing that manufacturing back to the United States, because this has gone further than being a quality concern. This is a national security issue at this point, because there's simply drugs that we can no longer manufacture in this country, and we need to fix that. With the help of government procurement, maybe as the catalyst to get that done. But unfortunately, Rosemary, we've done it again. We've run out of time, and we're going to have to pick this up at a later time and carry this topic forward, because it's something most people don't know about, and it's something I think everybody, you would agree with me, needs to really know about. This is Home Talk USA on the King Broadcasting Network. This has been the Made in America Hour. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll be with us again next week. Take care.